You've mentioned the projects we did in the last 20 years. It's more or less around 50 built houses. And I think what's important is that they have a strong physical presence. That's what we're very often thinking about. And in that sense, we're going close to the theme. We're coming close to the theme of tonight, or of the theme that I introduced: space versus form, form versus space. Because we think the two, they rely on each other. Of course, you know that, and they are very often almost equal in thinking. And for us, it's very important because we think on several levels we develop buildings that come from a spatial thinking, result in a strong form, and on the other hand, we interact within the city, and we first of all think about the appearance of the form in the environment. Yes, the buildings, they are a result and can be characterized by a quest for insight, which can be incorporated in form. Instead of using a linear method for this dialogue between form and space, we make use of an established design ethic to define priorities or a sequence of priorities. This open approach leads to houses with a prototypical nature, characterized by coherence and coexistence, without derivation of repetitive formalism. By thinking about space, as I mentioned, the first sketches normally, when you face a task, you start about working with lines, with the first sketches. You mainly start, or we mainly start with spatial thinking, and I think that's also the interesting starting point for the architecture, because space and light are the unaffordable values of architecture, because they are non-material. They're defined by their limits. The theme which makes architecture unique is the inner secret architects want to create. They relate to human scale, our body, and the possibilities of our perception. We think that spatial qualities must be thought of in every scale: the urban, the architectural, and even the scale of the detail. On the other hand, by coming to form, we think the first thing to have an idea about the form is the city itself, so the context. And that's the second very important thing to start create an architectural idea. On one hand, we have a task, and on the other hand, we have a site, a place where we need to interact, where we want to interact, and of course, with that, the thinking about form starts. So every place we visit has its certain traces. They come from history, they come from the architecture that has been built there before, and so we always interact. And very much of that thinking starts with the form, or we could also say with construction, with materialization. For us, this is very, very close together. So we think that there has to be, we have to distinguish between the spatial situation within a city, where we think about the tradition of the European city, of how we continue this building process of the urban tissue, and on the other hand, there's of course the buildings that are there. They are positioned in the free environment, the free topos, the topos that is more open and that would lead to another way of interaction between building and the environment. So there we distinguish between the two general situations. Of course, there's a lot of in between, but we think for the starting point, it's very important. In our work, we very often we have like two sorts of projects. On one hand, competition work, where very often the actual themes nowadays, especially in our country like Switzerland, is densification. So we really start thinking about existing situations, rethink them, or we further develop what is already there. So the question of a dialogue with the existing, the question of the materialization, what would be suitable to enhance the existing, that would enforce the atmospheric strength of a place, is very important. And on the other hand, we think that, or very often when we have commissions from private clients, there is a rather free environment. The buildings are not within an urban context. In that sense, we try to see the building as part of the environment, of a broader environment, of a bigger dialogue, of a more, let's say, prototypical way of getting in a dialogue with the environment. Yes, as I said, form is for us first of all coming of the contextual dialogue, and of course there we face a lot of hermeneutical issues. A building always kind of spreads out by its appearance and by the way we can read it, the way it symbolizes architecture, or the way it symbolizes a thinking. And so this is for us a conceptual level that comes beyond the more sculptural ideas of a house, the more physical presence of the house. And when we come to the projects and show a series of projects, like pairs of projects, I'd like to point out this rather overlooking theme, or this rather broader theme in our architecture. So so that's actually the idea. We can't say that we have a clear method, and this form versus space and space versus form. It very often depends on the actual site and on the actual task, and we try to let's say to establish a line of hierarchy, a line of priorities. This would create the individual DNA of an architectural concept and of each project. So in that sense, when we come to the projects, maybe this clarifies why almost every house has its own appearance, and the houses, I think we've done the last 20 years, they differ very much because we're not having our principles. We're not pushing through with architectural formalisms or principles. It's more an open process that is really kind of worked out in an open from this open thinking. Yes. So as I said, we consider houses as concentrated artifacts of our thinking and action. In the following, I would like to show the influence and relationship between the two areas by using case studies. So there's always pairs and groups of two to enhance the conceptual idea. Mainly two projects on different scales. Mainly, let's say, something more private, individual, and something more public in order to be related to the society and the city. I can hardly see what happens over there, I'm sorry. So it's, yes. I would like to start with the first pair of projects, and the plans that you see. They're not on scale. So we kind of we more try to bring two typologies or two signs, or to see the floor plan as a sign. So you have to scale yourself when you look at the plans. So on the left hand side there's a single family project that we completed in 2003, and on the right hand side it's a multi-story house, high-rise building which we completed a few years ago, 2 years ago more or less, and the theme is between the house and the city. So I'd like to talk about the strategy of layering layering floor plan. This is one of the themes we really work on since our beginning. So in order to find solutions for densification on one hand and openness. So it's densifying a situation within the city and still guarantee privacy. That's why we started on, or we started to develop in between spaces. And in these two projects, this is one of the very important things. So the in between the house itself and the city. And what you can see on the left-hand side is the first project, is single family house here with an image. You see the black, it's the house, the actual how it's inscribed with the glazing that's going all around. It's more or less a square floor plan, and then there's a double line or an additional line that is detached from the existing from the actual volume, in order to create this an in between the house and the environment. And that's what you see on the right hand side. We also call it the house with the mask. So we faced a situation, urban sprawl somewhere outside Basel in a small community called Ash. You can see here random houses from the 1970s, very anonymous, very much hidden behind fences, high fences of green, even the gardens. It looks more like a cemetery than really a place to live at. And we try. So in this project, we try not to build a house as the ones that exist but we try more to establish the idea of a pavilion, an open pavilion that is can be seen as an open structure, that can be seen as a secondary house, something that you would rather put in the park, in the city, or somewhere far out in the nature. So this is one of the first sketches. So as I said, there is let's say a primary volume, like a cube, fully glazed, and that describes, let's say, the space, the spatial attitude, and then the form, the mask that goes all around, and it kind of symbolizes something. It's like a mask that would go into a certain dialogue with the viewer, and that relates on issues of viewing and being viewed. So I see outside, and I control what's going on outside, and the viewers from outside, they're not looking through the glass house, but rather they face a mask, and the inner secret of the house, of the inhabitants, is not revealed by using this mask. So this is the first sketch, and now the floor plan. Yes, as I said, it's an open structure. I don't know if this is a pointer. It's not a pointer now. So very simple. You see rounded edges, round the corner, fully glazed. There's 4 columns, not in the corner, of course, but more or less here, not to be very visible. And then we have these meandering core elements that would generate a spatial flow. And of course, they can be seen as containers for toilets, for storing, for the kitchen, etc. And there's the stairs that lead you up to the more private floor, the upper floor. This floor plan is perforated with one outdoor space in the middle, an atrium, and a second cutout, a terrace, of course. And again, here you can kind of circulate. So references of modernism, of Mies van der Rohe, can be seen, of course. The open floor plan, the flow, and of course transparency. Now in this first image, you see the appearance of a house. It's more like almost a furniture. It could be a vitrine. So it's not exactly a house. It's very abstract in a way. So the spatial themes, they're clear. the house is connected with the environment. The inhabitants, they see the garden. The garden is part of the house, part of their living space actually. And above that, the private areas, sleeping rooms, they are hidden behind that curtain. Yes, yes, fully glazed corners again. The core elements painted very dark in order to maximize the visual effect between inside and outside. The cores, they are dark, they kind of hold the inhabitant, and at the same time the garden appears as something very bright. So it's the clarity of the garden that comes to push it through. On the first floor, a similar effect. So these meanders, they're also vertically, they develop vertically and create also spatial dialogue with the open facade. And here you see the effect of this mask. On one hand, the actual space is expanded. There's like an additional space. The limits of the space, like here, okay, fantastic. So the limit of the space is not the glass, it's going beyond. And what comes with it, and that has to do with the context, and what was very important for us, we kind of fragment what's going on around there. So this was also be a theme here. So you don't see the totality of the environment, of the neighborhood, but only small pieces, pixeled down to round forms, puzzled down to let's say, forms that can be understood. Yes, the very central part, this atrium, is open to the sky, and of course, the most intimate part of the house is an outer space, we could say. Mirroring effects, doubling effects come with it, of course, and here a final view on the house as we built it for an exhibition. And yes, we come to the next, or let's say the final word, structural layering of the facade creates an interspace that is open to interpretation and hence makes new levels of perception accessible. The corrosion, it's a metal, of course, a metal piece that corrodates in order to extend the metaphorical significance by adding up a time level. So this is the part of the house that would fall apart first. So when we built it, the metal workers, they would say by adding a 6 millimeter plate, it would probably take 20 years until it falls down, or until the holes, they change their form and they add up to a rather bigger form. I haven't visited the place for a few years. We haven't heard anything, so I think it's still in shape, or pretty good in shape. Yeah, the second project, as I mentioned, for us it has a name, and we call it, finally we call it Garden Tower. We had the idea of Green Tower or something, but I think Garden Tower focuses more on the actual idea of the house. It's a house that is part of a bigger development outside the city of Bern. It was a competition that was subdivided, so a plot of 24,000 square meter, so rather a big area, an open field, was subdivided into 4-5 parts, and also subdivided in terms of architectural themes. So there has been a urbanistic strategy that was written by Mark Angelil, and he finally had the idea to more work with a sampling strategy. It's not for Switzerland. It's rather something new, or let's say it's also something that comes more from the 1990s. So it's a strategy that is based on typological ideas and adding different typologies, causing friction, causing in between spaces that are not fully controlled. So if you see the image of the full scale of the overview, you will probably think what I mean, or you understand what I mean. So it's not the typical contextual dialogue thing where we normally work on when we do competitions within a urban context where we have certainties about what is going on next to our site, where we know we can really decide on the topics of the dialogue and topics of density, etc. So here it was more or less a gamble also. And so when he wrote the strategy, he defined these 5 themes, and this theme was living with view. So so it's more a functional programmatical approach. Living with view creates normally something vertical in order to generate view, to allow a broader view. So this was one of the themes. The second theme was a house at the court with a courtyard, house within a Baumhain. I don't even know the English expression. Trees within smaller trees, facing the trees. Living at the atrium houses, atrium typology was asked, and classical multi-family house with loggia balcony typology. And of course, when we started with this, we thought more of a vertical structure more than a vertical house, because we thought the contextual situation is not really given. We are not facing an existing city, we face nature. We are very close to the environment. We are very close to the outskirts of the city of Bern, to meadows, to forests, and we have a fantastic view into the Alps. So the idea was to create something independent in a certain way. Let's say like a amorphous vertical structure. It's not the house that goes into a relationship with existing houses. It's rather standing free. And now, yes, when you come back to the in-between theme, what you can see here is, again, fully glazed, the main corpse of the building, and then this extension, the balconies that go all around, and the in-between space that is a space that we see in dialogue with nature. Of course, you can see it in the image because the facade is fully covered with plants and creates let's say, a garden space, a space in order, or let's say, as spaces we know in the south, pergolas with grapes, with wine grapes, and so it brings the inhabitant very close to vegetation, and of course it creates a climate that is also in between. In summer it's been vaporized, the plants they bring cooler air and water. And well, this is now the project, part one of 5. So as you see, high-rise, court, tree, environment, atrium, and the 5th one, let's say, classical building. And again, on the level of the floor plan, you see how this footprint differs very much, and of course it's rather freestanding than going in a dialogue. What we gain is this free meadow. That is one of the goals of this verticality, of course, of the densification into the vertical. This was one of the first reference images, the structure that is being covered, a camouflage surface that tries to, I mean, it's built and it's controlled. The garden is kind of controlled, as in this image. The camouflage is a layer that tries to get in a dialogue, that tries to cover the structure in order to hide it or to bring it in dialogue with the environment, with the nature. Yes, the house has a rather particular form based on polygonal geometries. It is more or less, we could say it's the form of a hand. It faces the Alps, so there is a certain direction, the main direction. That's one thing, and the second thing is that it changes its size towards the sky. So it's not an endless tower. It's not the idea of the of the endless. It's more a vertical structure or a classical, a torso-like building. So there's a socket, and it's tailored, and there's also a finishing part at the very end. You see this in the first by layering the floor plans. Here again, so in this plan, this is more schematic. You see how the slabs, how they change the form, and they almost get a certain twist to the main vertical appearance. Yes, living with view, it meant for us thinking about experiences when we are outside in nature, when we go climbing, we face the rocket, and we're close to nature. So this was one of the elements to bring nature into verticality, as if you were somewhere on a rock, on 50 meters above ground. You have a direct contact, physical contact with nature. So we created these tanks. They're prefab. They're kind of brought on site and put in position. They kind of brought together with the on-site concrete. Then the whole structure was covered with a metal mesh, and now each of these tanks, the plants would cover an area of about 15-20 square meters. So it means altogether about 1,500 to 2,000 square meters of green vegetation. So it's not added on green, so that's the difference to other concepts. We think it's the green really comes out, it grows out of the structure, and the tank is part of the undulating of the form. It's part of the architectural expression. Yes, you see how the metal mesh is being cut out here by inserting these metal beams. And of course there's an overall envelope, finally a development that was made in order to define plantations on each side, different plantations, north side, south side, etc. Yes, here a few images of the house, how it appeared. Let's say it was last year, I think. So this was the first year of growth, and we expect, by having fantastic weather, full coverage. Yes, I talked about the floor plan, and of course the idea that each apartment, there's 3 apartments on each floor, and each apartment has a direct view, a direct visual contact to the alpine panoramic. That is kind of fantastic, and the major way to direct on. Here are a few images. Of course, these tanks, the way they're positioned, all together they create a kind of a flow, a spatial flow. There is an additional element, this let's say artificial rock that bows, that generates a certain like a rock on the slab that would give you the possibility to lean on, to lay on the ground, to lean on. And all together, of course, these forms are being bound together by the metal frames. Yes, I talked about the physical presence of the vegetation. So it comes really close. When you walk out of the apartment, you can kind of step on natural ground. Well, although it's not a meadow, it's not that big, but the symbol I think it goes into that direction. Yes, a few more images, how the house is integrated in the environment. So there's not only city, there's also farms. So it's really the very clear border between built environment and or built city and natural environment. Yes, discrete morphology makes the interspace appear as a microcosm between private, indoor, interior, and landscape. The relation to the enveloping garden creates a common identity that reinforces identification with the house and the location. As seen from outside, the superimposition of brackets, slabs, and climbing plants generates an optical interplay between free pictorial quality and illusion, similar to a classical perceptual illusion. So very abstract. Next theme, house within a house. This pair here focuses on let's say, superimposition of two identities. On one hand, there's a private family house with an outer form, with a certain symbolic identity, and an inner house. On the right-hand side, this is a floor plan of a project we did for the extension of the Accademia d'Architettura in Mendrisio. So the main form of the house is underground, and there is one middle part that is sticking out. It's a part that is being constructed in wood, so it's dialogue between two structures. And of course there's the inner spatial quality that can be described. There's also themes of the in-between space, but there is a certain symbolism or a symbolic expression that is part of a contextual dialogue. So yes, this residential house, it's actually built in an environment that changed a lot. So the client's an engineer that we know since years. Him or his family, he and his wife, they bought a plot of land, and when they finally decided to build a project, the whole neighborhood was, well, houses pumped out of the ground like mushrooms. So they came to us and asked, well, would you like to do a project here? And I mean, when they bought the land, it was probably a piece like here, you know, fantastic. And we thought, let's sell that plot of land and redo everything, start from the beginning. But they wouldn't agree. They said, try out, do something. And so we came up with something very, in a way, you could say, yeah, you're laughing there. Maybe it is ironic, a little bit. It is ironic, and that's one of the understanding of the project. So it's the form, and also this hermeneutical level. Let's say the form is a sign, and it symbolizes something. Let's say a traditional form of house. It's like a children's drawing. You would say this is normally the chimney is not vertical in children's drawing. I know that. So it's orthogonal to the sloping of the roof, but the rest is more or less could be children drawing. So there's this outer house, and it follows the maximum envelope. So everything that we were able to kind of gain as a space in order of the building codes, of the regional local building codes, we try to bring underneath this mushroom head, this outer house. And of course then there is a second construction within the existing, and the outer is perforated in certain positions to open up the inner house, not just to the in-between space, but also to the neighborhood. So this is the final floor plan that came out. So you see here there is a distance of about 3 meters that would narrow down to just gaps of 80 centimeters. There is the actual the gap for the entrance, where you sneak in, you sneak through this outer concrete part. You come in here, and then in the house, yes, this is the more or less the layout. There's double height spaces, so there's also a gallery here. And this part is the only part that is widely open. There's another one here. The envelope kind of opens up. So this part also has a direct view, and the other openings are punctuations. So rectangular, circular punctuations of the existing. And yes, by having these double height spaces, there's like a rather complex spatial construction or structure that is being formed. So you have not only the in-between space between the inner wooden construction and the concrete outer, so there's also, by having these double height spaces here and here and here, and in between the in-between. So you see like a series of layers that are being added up to create a spatial complexity, and of course also a density in atmospheric density. And yes, here you can see how this is a longitudinal section with the double height part here and here. As I said, there's this major opening on one side, but we use, well, here this is a punctuation, and we also use the chimney as a possibility to bring in zenithal light to the central bathroom. Well, here, when you approach the house, so you see how simple it appears due to given the given construction. So there's no additional layer on the roof. So it's just the concrete. It was rather difficult to do this, but I think it's tight. It works. And the 2 openings on this side and a third one here. So the interesting thing is that these don't give a clarity on what's behind. So they have their own language and their own size, appearance. So it's like this outer. Then you sneak in from the back here, and this black and white image illustrates the main floor with the double height here, and with the dark inner structure made of wood on site. So more or less this is a primary construction, and the glazing has been put into the primary structure. So it's not a framing or a window construction. It's rather, yes, more basic the way it's constructed. Yes, as I said, zenithal light in the center, double height spaces, and of course here how to collide in a certain way. There's also collision of forms. And a final image from the outside. The conceptual approach creates spatial density and complexity that is continued through an unusual material inversion. The gap between ground and concrete shell reinforces the physical impact of the shell and house by suggesting that the wooden structure carries the heavy load of the concrete shell. So this is an additional thing. So the house is not, it's more or less detached from the ground. So this is the first clue that you get to understand what is behind and what kind of the idea was, the intention was. Yes, I talked already about this next project, Mendrisio. I think what's interesting, it's the historical context where this plot of land is located, and of course, as you see here, this extension of the school, it accommodates new workspace for future architects, and it's touching the an existing palazzo from, I think, the 18th century, so Baroque palazzo. And more or less this whole structure is lowered underground. You have the contextual situation here from Mendrisio, and you see where this is the nucleus, so the central historical center of the city, and here in towards the south, more expanding areas where the first bigger residences were built in the Baroque, Renaissance Baroque, and this has been bound together to a campus for the university of the Ticino, of the Italian part of Switzerland. So there is a main house here with the Accademia, and this was actually the site where we were able to investigate about the future of the school. And while this image here more or less symbolizes the impact of our house in order of the scale of the existing. So the impact is rather small in terms of size, but in terms of the symbolism, it works rather, well, let's say, equal to the existing. You see here the existing, this is the extension of the school that was built a few years ago. The Palazzo Turconi, this is the old villa. This here is being built by Mario Botta. There is a medieval church, and here the layout of the inner core of our house that kind of sticks out of the ground. You see here how this platform surrounds the rectangular form, and you can also see how these three, more or less, they define an ensemble, and the fourth house is being pushed inwards here, like chest of drawers. And what you have to think about is the topography. This is more or less on a horizontal level, but the hill slopes downwards towards the west. This was the sketch or the image that we created for the competition. So on the level of the contextual understanding, of the historical understanding, we said there's the palazzo here on one hand, the church, the new cultural pavilion, and the workspace for students. And here in the image, what is being combined is a typological layout with let's say the school in the back with the palazzo, the rotonda for the culture, the church for the clerus, and of course the shed structure for workspace. So the architects, as usual, la galleria, di galere, underground workspace. Yes, again, an image from the surrounding, and it was rather difficult to come to this decision. What would be the form, the final form? What would be the form within a dominated area by houses with such a historical impact, such an historical appearance? Finally, we said we just follow the outline of the plots to we maximize here the space. So this is rather random, more or less. I mean, we go to the limits, and what is the important for the site and for the combination of houses and the interaction of the houses is this inner form, the additional form of this hall. So it means not vertical. We didn't bring the volume into verticality. We rather decided to push it underground, and now you see the actual scale. So it's rather a small sculpture in order to bring all the existing houses in a dialogue with the facade. Yes, workspace for architects. I think these are the proportions of the existing spaces in the Palazzo Turconi. So up to 870 square meters. The middle space, that is, let's say, the main working space, multi-use, flexible, is almost the size of the main room of the Palazzo. So this is the existing, more or less in every proportion, integrated within the existing structure. And we said we would like to kind of generate also a space that has a certain height, a verticality, a generosity, although it's being held by the surrounding walls. So we made studies on the structure, and we came up with this wooden structure that is being lowered into the ground, and that can be described as an open wooden construction. So a didactic approach has been developed for a simple conceptual sketch with the more pronounced expression of two autonomous principles of construction leading to a clear reading. A constructively honest and atmospherically dense realization is aimed at. So the shed, metaphorically, is a sign for itself in this historical surrounding. Here, final image. We come to the next theme, intimacy and size. On one hand, again, a private house, and on the other hand, a house or a bigger structure that we worked on here in Geneva. The topic intimacy and size describes the relationship of the individual human size or human space to the space of imaginary dimensions. So in both projects, there's the focus lays on this white surface here in the middle. So here, this is an atrium, full outside space. So let's say a cutout court, inner court, and this one here is a inner space being covered, but a space that brings all the functions together in a visual contact together. Yes, the residential house in Binningen, it's a project from 2006, so a little bit more than 10 years ago. It has a rather, again, a strange history, because the client, he bought this piece of land, and you can see how it looks. It looks as if there has been digging works already had been done. That means the previous owner, he had a project that he wanted to build, and he finally, I don't know, he decided not to do it, to stop his work and to sell the property. And what came with this, by the change of property, the authorities, they would say this is the original form of the land. So we actually had to bring a concept that would be lowered. And you see here, I don't know, it's all mirrored. I can't hardly see anything. So, but this more or less here is the neighboring. These are the neighbors, and so you're already, I mean, the natural topography, of course it changes, it lowers, but the house itself would even be lower to the existing form of the topography. And yes, that's why we came up with the idea, or with a very introverted concept. We said, we don't have to face the surrounding, because there would be a very peculiar dialogue between the new construction and the existing in the surrounding. So we completely thought about creating something introverted, concentrating on the garden and on an inner void, the middle of the house. So what you can see is an outer form that appears rather random, because we didn't really, well, of course it's nicely done, and of course the proportions they're quite right, but it's not a corner of a house that you would expect. Very similar to the other side. Here we have the new garden level. I mean, we were able to raise this by 2.5-3 meters. So there's a surrounding wall and one very small gap that allows you to see inside and to more or less understand how the house works. This here is a 6-meter height wall, and then there's one single window that faces the city, and of course some elements that would allow you to understand how the house functions. This is a model of an overview. So the house basically has 2 levels, one level in the ground and a added on garden level. And as I said, the two, they're being brought together by this punctuation, in the middle, that would allow you to have a visual dialogue. So on one hand, when you access, you see inside the house, or you can kind of, you're allowed to, or you can go underneath the existing structure. This here is a full cantilever part of the house. So this is it's like a arrival plaza, from where on you would go to the main upper level, and you would mainly circulate around this inner court. So all the functions are added up here. Circulation is a major theme to organize the floor plan, and here this is the glazing line. So this part here of the garden is also mainly defined by the circumferential walls. So two sleeping rooms, a third one here. Sorry, this is a courtyard. Bathroom for parents, bathroom for visitors, guests, children, visitors' room, and the kitchen on the other side. A few images. The house is constructed in concrete mainly. As I said, when you access, you can actually walk inside, let's say, under the house. And you also, I mean, you see how this middle part is being elaborated in the way that it almost becomes the main facade of the house. So it's not, the outside is not really being controlled, but this part here is very much elaborated, by giving it an additional form here and verticality. So there's also a lining and a proportion that is interesting to look at. Yes, when you enter here, we come to the first floor. Of course, spatial flow is one of the major themes here, and the outer materialization is being brought inside. There is a certain, let's say, a continuation of form by these, frames of the windows that would become furniture in the inside. So a combination of more mineral elements in concrete, plaster, and wooden elements for everything that moves, that can be moved. Softens the appearance in a certain way. Yes, now this is the winter image, where you can see through the inner court to the other side. So on one side there is a workspace, and on the other side there's the kitchen. So the dialogue is very interesting, we think, and of course this image, it's it tries to give you an idea of the intimacy of this inner space. So it's a very silent inner space that, in the best case, calms you down, that allows you to rest and just look at the trees, because it's not accessible, so it's not part of the garden. It's just you're being very close to the trees. You're facing the leaves, and so we think it transports the nature, not in a physical way, but more in a maybe in a poetic way, to the central part of the house. So the specific spatial nesting is a response to the prevailing architectural density. Its open center develops contemplative qualities and hence turns into an intimate private space. A few more images. Of course, the structure is rather important. The form that comes out of that structure is important, and it follows the idea of intimacy. For instance, this beam here is almost like a piece that is missing in the surrounding wall. So this is like two parts. Depending on your position in the perspective, they would come together, close up, or yes, open the view to the sky. Yes, the structure with plants. Here, a summer, a more atmospheric image for summertime. And the next project, headquarters of the Crédit Suisse in Geneva. Well, the bank building, you can see it here. What we built on was parts, still existing parts of a construction of the 1930s. So, well, I don't have to explain where we are in the center of Geneva here, the corner point of the, let's say, almost medieval nucleus of the city here on the more southern border of the Rhone. So this position is a corner point in that medieval development. It burned down, and from that moment on, I think there has been a freestanding. So I don't know, when was it? This incident, 1730, when it burned down part of the city. You know it. No, you don't know it? Oh my God. No, I have to tell you something. Yeah, anyways, the first bank was built in 1860 and it was torn down, well, more or less 50 years after, to be replaced by this structure of the 30s, Neo-Razionalismo, Italian influence. Turrentini is the name of the architect that built it. And well, we thought it's a fantastic, when we saw these images, we thought, well, it's fantastic how clear the volume stands here in this urban context. And when we faced the situation a few years ago, we were astonished how much you can kind of destroy by just adding up, well, I don't know, profiles, cutting down the proportions of the windows, covering the existing stone by adding up, I don't know, insulation material, etc. And of course, the idea was to reorganize the whole building, and we thought there is still a lot of value there, and we would like to work with what is being left, or what can be used, and we came up with a more, let's say, almost classical structural concept that brings back verticality, that is a little bit more open, of course, and that focuses more on the structural form than on an assemblage of materials. So that was there already. So aluminum and two different stones, etc. So we So this illustrates pretty much a white model and openings, just openings. So in the construction we did, the windows, the frames are not even, they cannot even be seen. So they're covered behind. So it's just the stone structure that creates the expression of the house. Yes, it has a certain similarity to, let's say, the sculptural qualities of the existing. Of course, it's. I mean, we try to elaborate a structure that can be seen as a continuation of the 1930s building from the outside to again gain a simple expression, and I think this is what can be seen here in these images. As I said, it's mainly structure, no frames, just glazing and natural stone, artificial stone. So these elements here, they're redone in concrete. We try to find the right mixture to come very close to the Molière stone that comes from local stone. I don't know, digging. Yes. In the competition, we try to keep a lot of the inner structure. Finally, of course, seismic problem, fire problem. That's what comes out. But what was interesting that these elements here, they are already hybrid structures. So this is a concrete inner core in a U shape, so like this. And the outer, well, it was covered with natural stone, 5 centimeter thickness. And what was interesting that we were able to put a second structure exactly in here. We were even able to insulate it. So there's like a construction, multi-layer construction. Yes. Well, here. I mean, this is a generosity that I think we brought into the house. This openness to the city on one side, and of course the inner atrium follows the idea of a clarity and of insight into the functionality of the bank, into the workflow of the bank. So the inner structure made of light concrete. It also stands in a certain dialogue to the outer structure in natural stone. And here this one is perforated by polygonal tank-like elements or boxes that pump out of the concrete structure. A few images when you enter, you have this flight of stairs to bring you up to the main level. And here the space opens up to the sky, almost 6 floors upwards, and the pump outs, they appear as let's say, also a flight of stairs towards the sky. Yeah, the inserted glass elements, they are sanded, so there's not a full transparency, but let's say the moving of people can be understood, can be read, but you would never understand who's standing behind the curtain or behind the glass. And what is interesting, or what brings this work close to the private house, it's the intimacy that is being created by these very small, very dense bump outs, these spaces that are that enable you to kind of like stand on a balcony within this rigid inner atrium structure. Another image. And of course, depending on the light, the transparency is lowered, so there's more reflection because the surface of the glass is kind of destroyed. It has a crystalline appearance by this sanding process. A very, very well, let's say almost a brutal way to work with glass, but a very effective way. Yes, here one more image, and yes, what we think and what you can see here in this model, it's a very early model we did. So the vis-a-vis of to each other, that's I think that's an experience that brings a sense of community. Well, that is created by looking into the open space. So the people that are working there, they would, when they move into these boxes, they look into the central space. They see everything that goes on. It's almost like a public plaza, the ground floor plan, all the action that goes on, and the experience. It's like just like when people stand to each other, next to each other in a museum when you look at an image, like a painting. So there is a certain intimacy and still an awareness of distance, because there is, let's say, this box is an individual room, and you would just glaze at the middle, and there's another person that faces or looks at the same action, but they wouldn't get in a direct contact. So it's an interesting way of communication. So we would say aloofness and intimacy at the same time. I don't know, I'm talking a lot. You have the hand. That's good. Yes, another pair of projects under the title of supporting core, so inner core that supports the structure. So there are similarities, of course. I said house in the house, etc. But in this case, it's really structural. So the inner form, of course, they generate spaces here, but they're also structural. That means they are there's a necessity in order to keep the outer, the existing. So both projects are based on existing structures. On one hand, there is a summer house in Ticino, in Linescio. It's in a side valley of the Ticino, and this is a project not yet built for the Kunsthaus Basel-Land. It's in the outskirts of Basel, on the Dreispitz areal. So today's mixed-use construction often hide the existence of structural principles. Contrary to this, dealing with old existing buildings can reveal new possibilities in a quest for congruence of structure and space. So form and structure are really depending on each other. Structure is also an expression of form. Yeah, Linescio is located in the remote side valley of the Valle Maccia. The population practices subsistential agriculture. So people, they were depending on the forest in these side valleys. You know, chestnut trees. And what happens nowadays, a lot of, families, they moved out from the valley because they were seeking the possibilities given in the cities. And these are nowadays almost, let's say, remote areas. So also in the case of Linescio, actually the forest is growing towards the villages. In certain areas, they even already cover older stone structures. So when you go walking there, you really find houses or groups of houses within the forest. That's what happens. In the case of the summer house here, we found a structure that was uninhabited since 50 years. And the idea was to create a summer house in order to be very close to the traditional way of living there, not to now kind of create a luxury space, fancy and nice, but more to go back to, or as a vacation home, to go back to an archaic feeling of living, very much connected to elements, to water, fire, air. So That was the conceptual approach for the house. What you can see here is the structure after the re-erection. So when the house was up and down for the 50 years, the roof collapsed. All the wooden parts they got weak. So the in-between beams, they would collapse and the roof fell down. And well, the idea was to create or to kind of gain form, to recreate the original form by pouring in this house or this structure that is being poured against the existing stone wall, and that only kind of has a visuality from outside in certain positions. So here you see the form. Of course, originally this was a 3-story, 3 floors, one for the heating. I mean, the goats that would heat in the winter, and storage. And here this is the main space for living and sleeping areas here up on the, let's say, the second living floor. And in the annex, the family used to dye chestnuts. So it was a dye fireplace to dry chestnuts. Yes, and black, of course, is now the new construction put in. There's 3 elements that show what happened. There's here a pond, a chimney, and the third one is this frame, the only actually glazed window in the house, because the inside has shutters but no windows. So the shutters, they are made of wood. Once they're open, you have the fresh air. There's no glazing or anything that would stand in between the inside and outside, or stand in between you and the nature. Yes, there is still a part of a in-between level here. You can see this is the position of the existing outer door. In earlier days, you would enter the upper floor here, and what is being created here is like a heated stone or a heating stone with a chimney. So when it's getting colder towards winter, you would make a big fire, and during the day, this concrete block would kind of store the heat. And now, yes, you see the possibilities of the new structure. We were able to go double height, and now this unreveals the history of the house. You see what is there. The existing windows, they're still there in parts, but not everywhere. And of course, these 2 now, they are getting one, or a new house. You see the layers, or how the concrete was poured. The casting follows, of course, the idea of layering. Very simple. So it's I don't know the word in English. Einhäuptige Schalung. So cast against the existing wall. Yes, there's one frame or one door to the annex. This is, while rudimentary, not done very much, just the floor. That would here create kind of a kitchen, and in the very back, this lowered bassin. So this was the fireplace. It's still rather dark and black, and now it's the place where you can enjoy the water falling from very high. Yes, so this is a final image, I think. So the disintegration or the decay of the existing structure disclosed new spatial possibilities and was the starting situation for the homogeneous single-room house. The bareness of the poured-in concrete continues the history of the house in an authentic manner. A unity of space, structural form, and material enriches its existence. In the case of the project for the new extension, or the, let's say the new Kunsthaus Basel-Land, we were working on within an existing warehouse. So let's say one-story warehouse. So it's more or less a platform for a transitory space, a platform to store goods and let's say a transitory in the sense that you would bring them by train, store them in the house, and load them on the truck. So it's more or less a platform with a shelter, not much more. So this shelter, exists since the 1940s, 50s. It's rather weak. It's rather, let's say, just self-carrying. There's not a structural. There's, let's say, reserve. There's not a structural reserve. So the lack of battery. Or is that me? Time run off. So anyway, otherwise, just turn around that one. So I can just explain what it's all about. There is an art society of Canton Basel Landschaft, and it was their idea to have new exhibition premises. So this old storage building located in the development site Dreispitz was available for this purpose, and so they asked a series of or several architects to hand in proposals, and of course they were open also for new construction, new structures. And in the beginning, it was a a dialogue process. In the beginning, we thought you don't even have to touch the structure; it will collapse. So just get rid of it, and we do something nice and new. And yeah, actually, in the dialogue, we failed completely in a way with all our proposals. There were several proposals that we handed in, and then we came to the conclusion: maybe we would really lose something. We would lose something of the DNA of the site in the general, because Dreispitz area is a very important area for the city of Basel, because it's actually in between. Part of it is on the land of the Canton Basel-Stadt, and part of it is already in Canton Basel-Landschaft. And the two, they're half cantons. A horrible situation we have here in Basel. It's worse than Appenzell, Innerrhoden and Ausserrhoden, I think. So for architects and all the people that are kind of thinking about development of society and development of the city, this really could, for us, this whole area could become a city of both cantons. There could be a new new center where you wouldn't think about where am I now? Am I on Canton Basel-Land or Basel? You understand. Basel-Stadt. So I don't know. I think the border is somewhere here. I don't know. So somewhere. And a few people moved out here because they live in the lovely Helsinki building. Herzog Dümmerow did a really nice structure. And when they had to sign in, they finally found out we're not living in Basel-Stadt anymore, because they thought this is Basel-Stadt. So, but they didn't even care, because it's really an interesting place with a lot of changes. Yes, here, let's say this is a more abstract image that shows development processes. So there's the HGK, die Hochschule für Gestaltung und Kunst. The Transitlager is the first residential building, or one of the first residential buildings beside the Helsinki from Herzog Dümmerow. These here are working spaces for the students. So the major goal was to kind of bring the creative scene on one spot in order to generate a certain process in this former industrial area. And now one of these pieces of the mosaic would be the Kunsthaus Basel Landschaft. Here a few images. The Dreispitz is rather special because it was like a non-territory area. It wasn't in terms of toll customs. It wasn't part of Switzerland. So the firms could bring in loads, keep it here, and deal with it. Purify the material maybe, and then sell it. So you didn't have to go through customs. So this is very similar, like Hansestadt, Hamburg, for instance. So the process you can see here, alcohol smuggling, stuff like that. And now, as I said, it's very transitory. Things coming in, and now you see here the general layout is defined by the axis of the railway tracks. So the structure of the whole area is really there's not a urbanistic layout that was defined by urbanists. It's more a functional layout defined by the axis lines of the railway tracks. Yes, so this is the existing storage, and the hall completely open. And you can see here how fragile this steel structure is, and there's no you couldn't add up any additional loads. So the idea was to still use it and to transform it into a exhibition space. And here you all might know Gordon Matta Clark's work that he did. He cut out, or one of his concepts was to cut out holes out of dense, or let's say closed structures. So that was one of the major ideas in order to generate a new space, a space for exhibition, to bring in zenithal light. Zenithal light is a light that has a constant quality, and to insert an additional structure to be able to bring in additional load, to be able to subdivide this space of 1,500 square meters in order to make it accessible for artists, for young artists, also to make it to make it possible to create smaller installations, smaller exhibitions. You cannot fill a space of 1,500 square meters if you don't have the power. Well, mostly big artists, they have a whole big team to create big exhibitions. But so in this case, the idea was to insert this meander, this form that perforates the roof by having three towers. The towers that on one hand symbolize the new function, but also effectively bring zenithal light into the core area of the building. So you see the combination of the very simple layout of the horizontality in combination with the tower-like vertical elements. Yes, as I say, it's subdivision. These triangles here, they would be cut out in the inner space to create orthogonal spaces that can be subdivided different sizes from 50 square meters up to 150 square meters, etc. And there you have you get the first impression of how these elements they create a certain light concentration. So it's not the idea of having a constant light like in a museum where the light condition really needs to be controlled. Not too much light, constant light. Paintings, they don't want to have spotlights on. So in this case, we have a more dynamic idea of the space and with a certain concentration of light here by bringing in the natural sunlight. And of course, besides that, there is a general flow of light by having the LED. Yes, the other perspective, due to the other direction. So we have by adding this second level, we have the opportunity of still seeing the existing in its full height and its proportion, and you still get the idea of the former size of the building, of the length, the height. As I said, different ways of subdividing are possible, and concentration of the lights, and yes, an additional experience has been shown in this reference from James Turrell. And here you can see the proportions. So there is really a new verticality arising. So on one hand, we have the length of the building. That's enormous, up to 40 meters. And here, by adding the vertical, you just have a spatial experience when you visit the house, when you visit the exhibition. And there is a ever-changing situation because the triangles, I mean, on one hand, they allow light to come in. There are big cutouts. And on the other hand, there is also moments during the day where there wouldn't be a direct sunlight, a direct sun impact. Yes, so this is the main goal of the towers. We are positioned in the second position to be seen here from the main plaza of the new Dreispitz Kunst campus or art campus. And here the contextual situation with houses that have been built. So this is the Helsinki Tower, this is the Transitlager from Bjarke Ingels Group, and this high-rise block from Morger and Detley Architects. So the combination of the two structural principles illustrate the development of the use of this transitory place. The light admitted through the zenithal openings creates a suitable space for art. The next and the last theme, or the last two projects, stand under the title of physicality, or the Körperhaftigkeit in German. Two morphological approaches are compared under the title physicality. Their strategy is comparable in the genesis of form. A house in a free topology, or in the free topos, and a house in the urban context. On one hand, what you see is a house that we built here in a fantastic area, in a place, let's say a Postkartenlandschaft. Postcards would be made in the central of Switzerland, La Suisse Profonde, Lake of Lucerne. Yes, this is more or less where it is, and the plot of land was somewhere here, one of these parts. And the spectacular thing is, it's not just the lake, but it's the vis-a-vis. It's the other side of the lake that goes so deep, or that grows so deep, so steep out of the water, that it wouldn't be possible to build any structures, any construction, any houses. So when you view the landscape, you more or less you just have pure nature, water, and rocks and forest. So a fantastic place to live if you like to be bored, to contemplate nature, etc. And well, this house here, the structure was made for an artist couple that travels around the world very much, 3/4 of the year. And they say, when we come here, we want to settle, we want to feel very much held by the house and the environment. And of course, it will be our private cosm. And that's actually why we came up with a more diverse concept. So the house is not just a simple box, because most of the houses, they are simple boxes with one big gesture, just one window to see to have a fantastic view. Of course, that's important, but we thought it's more important to feel like in a house with a diversity of spatial conditions. So here is the cross section where you can see how it's positioned. So the slope of the hills being seen, and the floor plan here. This is the upper floor plan. Here you can see how the house is being part of an assemblage of very simple boxes, actually. But these parts, slabs and columns, they grow out of the ground or of the primary shape of the house. So they would stick out kind of in order to reach, to generate a spatial flow, and of course to also to generate more an abstract form of a house, an abstract composition of elements that we call architecture. Yes, so on one hand we have the nice view, but what is the value of the slope is this backwards area here, where we created a more dense space, let's say an outside courtyard. So the idea was to see this as like an urban or more urban part of the house, in order to have the open generosity of the landscape on the other side. Yes, yeah, you see here the structure that can be seen as a major idea or a major topic to subdivide the space, to generate a series of spatial conditions. So in the backwards, in this back area, verticality is the major theme, formal theme. So you have the access on the upper level, would have the possibility to enter the house, or you walk down here, walk around, enter the house again. So it's more or less it's a work on addition and subtraction, fragmentation. In a way that the house can be seen as we could even say a structure that is not finished. It has an appearance of something unfinished. This is what you see maybe in this image. So there are parts that create a gesture, a generosity, but that are not controlled or fully controlled, that are not controlled in a dictum of control of form. A few more images. When you access from the back, again, the theme of the verticality by having these cutouts in the ceiling will bring certain verticality. And then when you enter the house, you're already out of the house again, because the gap between the two parts would allow you to have a first glimpse of the landscape, of the nature, but just an idea of the landscape, not the full panoramic view. The back is rather dense and enclosed, and here, of course, suddenly the house opens up. So there's a lot of, drama almost, I would say. And this is what makes private houses interesting. So the idea of the individual space, and of course the quality of spaces of different proportions that are being brought in a dialogue or in a direct spatial contact. So the lower level, and here an image that shows how this, let's say the wideness, the panoramic is also subdivided into parts. So you always, it's more an addition of parts of the landscape than just this one single view. Yes, the night shot unveils the conceptual code of the house between abstract form and a generous gesture towards the environment. So this is, of course, it's a double shot with a, almost a vibration in the image. So the last project is, on the contrary, it's in the middle of the city of Basel. It's part of a development area, Basel North, a former industrial area that is has been developed in the last decade, and will also be further developed in the next years. And the task was to develop a multi-functional central block. So this house combines retail areas, commercial areas, but also residential, so apartments. I think 70 something, more or less 70 apartments within this dense block. So this form more or less follows the property line. So there's no additional outside space. Everything that we were able to do is done by these two punctuations, by these two cutouts. So as you can see, the form is poured in concrete, effectively, homogeneous, but it has a very changing geometry from, let's say, clear cuts to more gentle flow. So all appearances are being combined, or the house comes actually from a strategy that we called response urbanism. So it is part of an environment that was changing in that period and that had existing elements. For instance, here you see round. This is an existing corner building, rounded here. This is a building that was built after our building, also with this element. So we followed up with the idea. We came up with the idea of the weaving, of the folding of the facade. The idea was to follow or to pick up this flow of the road and to kind of create a certain or a bigger sized public space. As I said, triangular plot, fully built, the volume pushed towards the infrastructure. So this was a major access road or a linking road between France and Germany, 24,000 vehicles per day. And in order to bring this whole traffic out of the city, tunnels were being built. And this tunneling, I go back to this image here, this tunneling at the same time made it possible to rebuild this part of the city. On one hand, you have the 19th century structure, urban tissue, very homogeneous, very clear in the way the urban spaces are being defined. And of course, in this position, the situation changes and bigger forms, more industrial complexes defined the atmosphere and the site. Yeah, so this is the form that, as you can see here, on one hand is pushed against the infrastructure, and on the other side, it's possible to see it as a solitary building, in order not to follow the curved road here. And again, in this position here, the idea was to generate a certain freedom for the building to be seen as a freestanding, or as if it were completely freestanding. So it's a combination of dialogue with the existing, within the existing context, and establishing of a strong, let's say, hermetic form, hermetic block. Yes, I flip through here, ground floor plan with 5 staircases that would lead to the upper floors. The layout of the first floor with apartments, I think 13, 14 apartments per floor. And you see here how the typology changes from a more orthogonal type to, of course, this more polygonal types with a more expressive concept, spatial concept. The 2 first floors are for commercial uses. From here upwards, we have the residence, the apartments. The house is also, the roof is sloped to kind of have a lower facade here to the plaza and a higher facade on the rounded corner. Yes, show you within a few photos. The plaza can be accessed from the bridge directly. You see how this homogeneous form is being perforated by generous openings, freely positioned. So it was always the idea not to differ between the different uses. So this is commercial, actually. This is residential. So we wanted to create a house, just a big house, not a building complex, where you can really read the different functions, or where you could say the functions are being staggered. So this has to do with identification. As an inhabitant, you just know this is the house where I live in. It's not part of the house where I live. So you wouldn't really differ from one window to the other. They're more or less the same in proportion, or let's say in the size. Yeah, I talked about the form, or the generation of the form, more horizontal towards the plaza, and verticality towards the access road. In this part, the house is also being perforated by digging out these loggias. So this has to do with the noise situation, because there's still, let's say, a certain impact on the building by the traffic. So parts of the house are double glazed. So there's an outer layer of glass that functions as a buffer, as a noise buffer for the apartments. And in this part with the access road, the noise level is low enough to be able to open directly to the urban space, to the outside. You see now how this sloped roof would generate superposition, or give a superposition for the house within the surrounding with the block structures. The outer corpse was poured in insulating concrete, so it's just one layer, thickness 40-45 centimeters. It's a very porous concrete, of course, because of the granulate, the gravel that is made of glass, foam glass, and it has a certain roughness that you can see here. Also, it's an investment project, so we had to accept, let's say, the most simple construction for concrete, the most simple way of dealing would bring this additional drawing, the lines, when we saw the first samples, we thought this is quite interesting because the house itself has a certain solidity in its size and its formal DNA. Yes, circular for stairs, triangles for stairs. What is interesting, the form, the polygonal form, is creating a spatial flow here in the courtyard. So you would never have a face-to-face situation. So there's always a, let's say, like a situation in medieval cities where the roads, they kind of change the direction slightly. And so this enables us to be very generous with openings. And the most generous opening is this cutout of the second courtyard. So this would be would give a view into the city through the gap. And yes, intimacy on the other side through this, let's say, the materiality and the physical presence of the material concrete. This image shows the in-between space between the two courtyards. Here you see the gap on one side and you have the view into the other bigger courtyard. And one more image to illustrate the quality of this inner space, of this very, very enclosed part of the house. Yes, this is about it. I would have one or two more projects, but they're not under these themes. But I think maybe there is some time for questions. And actually, I'm also heading on for Genève, almost. So thanks a lot for attending, and see you soon.